Hello, everyone, and welcome to my chess course, Become a Chess Player. This course will be for every player that knows the basic rules of the game, but wants to break the 1200 rating barrier. So, in this first lesson, we will learn how to make effective opening. By those who don't know, the opening means the first moves of a chess game. But there is actually a concept of opening that I like more. And this is a concept that will help us to integrate the concepts and the fundamentals that we will be looking at in this video. So to understand very well all the content of this video, first we need to speak about the center. What is the center in chess? This is what we consider the center, these four squares. And the squares in blue is what they call the extended center. And in chess, the control of the center has a very, very big importance. And it's really, really important that you understand this concept very, very well. So you may wonder, why is the center so important in chess? Take a look at this. This is a knight on the edge of the board. So if we see the squares in green color, these are the squares that the knight can go in one move. If we see the squares in blue color, these are the squares where the knight can go in two moves. So you see, there is not many squares in total. Now let's compare this knight with a knight in the center of the board. It's shocking. This is a knight in the center of the board, and once again, the green squares are the squares where he can go in one move, and the blue squares are the squares where he can go in two moves. Actually, I didn't count how many squares in total, but I think it's very graphic, so it's very easy to see and very easy to understand the difference in power that a knight has in the center of the board compared to the edge of the board. Because one thing that you should really understand if you want to get good at chess is that the squares that you control, how many squares you control, it's a really important element to win in a chess game. Because if you control many squares, that will give you many options, which makes more likely to have a very, very good option. So it's very important to control the center of the board. So this will bring us to the first principle when we are starting a chess game, which is control the center of the board with your pawns. So you may ask, why with the pawns? And now we have to speak about the value of the pieces. So in chess, um, the most valuable piece is of course the king, because if you lose the king, you lose the game. So it's the piece that we should take more care of. And then the queen, it's worth 9 points. The rooks are worth 5 points. The knights and the bishops are worth 3 points. Although some people prefer to consider the bishop a bit stronger than the knight, like 3.5 points. For me, 3 points it's a good way to start learning because it's simpler. And the pawns are worth 1 point. This is the material value. So in chess, you should dominate the center first with your pawns, because your pawns, they need to ensure safe squares for the rest of your pieces, as they are the less valuable piece. So I decided to show you an example where white tries to control the center with the pawns and black tries to control the center with the knights. So white is occupying the center with the pawns, which is the right thing to do, and black is trying to occupy the center only with the knights. So the problem with this strategy is that these knights, they don't have stability. What does it mean, stability? Stability means when a piece is on a safe square, which is particularly very important in the first moves of the game. Because if one of my pawn advances and it attacks the knight, it will force that knight to move. Why? Because the pawn, as I said, it's worth 1 point, and the knight, as I said, it's worth 3 points. So this knight has to move by force, and then it can be attacked again. And then this other knight can be attacked. And then, as you can see, black is just moving the knights around, and white is the one who is actually controlling the center. So white already has the control of all these squares. That will be very important in the future. As I showed, the central squares are really, really, really important. So definitely the first step is to control the center with the pawns. And this is the first principle that you should follow, because that will give your pieces, especially your knights and your bishops safe squares to play behind your pawns. Now, the second principle, of course, after you control the center with the pawns, is to develop your pieces to active and safe squares. You should keep in mind these two parts of what makes a piece good. So you should try to find squares that are active, where the piece controls a lot of squares, but you should also find squares that are safe. Let me put you an example of this. So for example, if you play e4, e5, let's say the move bishop b5. So this move might look like a good move because you are making this bishop to play. The problem is that this bishop can be attacked, for example, by this pawn. And if you move the bishop here, it can be attacked once again by another pawn. And actually, it is black the one who is controlling the center, and you are just moving the bishop over and over again. So it's important to find active squares, but it's also important to find safe squares. And there is a very important principle, which is if you can develop a piece. By the way, I want to make a stop here because if you don't know what develop a piece means, it basically means when you move the piece from its initial square. So, for example, this knight, when it goes to a square that it's not the initial square, you are basically developing the knight. And it's very, very important to develop the pieces to save squares, and it's particularly good if you can develop your pieces by attacking your opponent's pieces. So, for example, in this move, after e4, e5, both sides are controlling the center, and a really good way to play for white is the move knight f3, because the knight here, first of all, cannot be attacked. Second, it controls a lot of squares, as you can see. And third, it attacks one of the opponent's pieces. So this forces the opponent to defend. And this is the ideal way of developing. So for example, the game can continue with a move like knight c6, also developing and defending. White can also develop the knight. And then you can, for example, develop this bishop, attacking this knight, and then castle. So this would be like a normal way to develop the pieces at the beginning of the game. And I want to speak about something which you may wonder, and is why not developing the queen really fast? Like the queen is the most powerful piece. So one thing that you may be wondering is, for example, why I don't play this move, queen f3, just activating and developing my most powerful piece. The problem with this is that, as I mentioned before, the stability is a very, very important concept. So normally in chess, bringing the queen to the center too early can cause you problems because the opponent's pieces may attack your queen. For example, this move, knight c6, threats to come with knight d4 and attack your queen. And what is the difference between the queen and, for example, the bishop and the knight? That if the queen gets attacked by any piece, you have to move it because it's the most powerful piece. So bringing the queen to the center too early, it is good only if the queen cannot be attacked. So I want you to understand this concept really well, because sometimes bringing the queen to the center can be really good, can be a good strategy, but you have to make sure that the queen cannot be attacked by any of your opponent's pieces. So, for example, I decided to use this position as an example where white can make the move queen d4. So this is why it's really important to understand the reason behind the concepts. Because I have seen some chess coaches, they try to only explain the concept but don't explain the reason behind. And for me, I don't like this method because for me, I feel this method, it's like underestimating your own students. So for me, I prefer to explain the reason behind the concept so you can also find the exceptions, because in chess every rule has exceptions. So you may learn a lot of new ideas and a lot of new theory, but there will be positions where this rule will not apply. So in order to identify those positions very well, you should understand the deep reasons behind these rules. Okay, so this is a good example where the queen can go to the center. It can control a big part of the board, really exert big pressure, for example, over this diagonal, and the queen cannot be attacked. Like you can check black's pieces one by one. This bishop cannot attack it. This knight cannot attack it. The rook cannot attack it. So there is no pawn that can attack this queen. So this queen is perfectly safe on this square. And this is a great example. And now I want to speak about the final principle of the opening, which is make the castle. What does it mean, the castle? I hope you already know this. I will go to this board to quickly show you. So, as you may know, the castle is this special move where you can switch the king and the rook. And this is extremely important. Why? Because we spoke about the center and how important it is the center to control the center with the pieces and with the pawns. So, if most of the pieces and the pawns will be in the center, they will go to the center and they will fight in the center. You don't want to have your king in the center. You want to have your king in one of the sides of the board, in one of the flanks, because in the center there will be a big war at the beginning of a chess game. So it's very important that you make the castle. And now I want to put all these principles together and show you one game of one of the most brilliant chess players of all time, the North American genius Paul Morphy. By the way, this video series, I will also make it with another video series where I will be applying these concepts into actual games that I will be playing. So all the concepts that I explained today, next week I will make another video where I will be playing games against players below 1200 and I will be applying all these concepts. So I really recommend you to subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss any of these videos, because at the end it will be a whole theoretical series of how to become a chess master, and also with the practical part where I will be playing and I will be explaining all the concepts. So I really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, and if you smash that like button, it would be really, really great. So let's go to the game of the North American genius Paul Morphy, one of my absolute favorite chess players. So this game is between Paul Morphy and Celso Golmayo y Zúpide. And the game starts with e4. So Morphy starts the game by controlling the center, e5, knight f3. As we said, this is a really good move, attacking the pawn. Knight c6, and now bishop c4, developing the bishop to a square where first of all, it's very safe. And second of all, it's attacking the f7 square, which at the beginning of the game, this is something that you may know, it's some good extra information. This is the weakest square at the beginning of the game. Why? Because it's only defended by the king. So if you check all the other squares, they are either defended by another piece that is not the king, but the f7 square, it's only defended by the king. So this is an excellent point to start an early attack in some situations. So in general, the c4 square, it's an excellent placement for the bishop, especially when black pawn goes to e5, because then this diagonal is open. So if black pawn goes to e6, then this square is not so great because the bishop can be attacked. So particularly when the pawn goes to e5, I really, really like the move bishop c4, because this diagonal is very powerful. So bishop c5, black does the same. And now Morphy goes with a very, very interesting move, which is the move b4, the Evans gambit. What is the idea of the move b4? It may shock you because it seems that black can just take the pawn. The problem with taking the pawn, which is what black did, by the way, is that now white can gain tempos over this bishop. And now this bishop is not so stable. As you can see, white is attacking the bishop, preparing to control the center with the pawns, and also white is opening a new line for his queen. And it's very, very interesting move, and I really recommend this opening. Below 1500, 1600, I think the Evans gambit, it's a great opening. So black plays bishop c5, and look what Morphy does. By the way, I want to comment a little bit on bishop c5, because bishop c5 is actually not a good move, because you're placing the bishop on an unstable square where it can be attacked by a pawn. So it's really not a good move. Much better is the move bishop a5, where the bishop is much safer. The bishop cannot be attacked easily on this square, or even the move bishop e7. And this move may seem a bit passive, like the bishop doesn't seem very active on this square, but as I mentioned, it's not only about activity, there is always the very important concept of stability. So bishop c5, and Paul Morphy makes the castle. So Morphy already controlling the center with pawns, Morphy already castled. He just needs to finish the development and he will be good to go, and he can start launching an attack. So black plays d6 and now d4. So here we can understand why having the bishop on this square is not so great, because now this move attacks the bishop with a pawn, and as we know, the pawn is worth 1 and the bishop is worth 3. So the bishop needs to move. Pawn takes, and bishop b6. Now Morphy develops the other knight to an excellent square. Usually these are the two best squares for the knights. Not always, but usually. Knight f6 by black. And I want to make you see what is the advantage of having a pawn center. In this position, white is a pawn down, but white already has two big advantages. One is that the king is already castled, black's king still in the center. And the other advantage is the pawn center, the massive pawn center. What is the advantage of having this pawn center? That black's pieces, they find a hard time in getting good squares, in getting safe, stable squares. So in this position, Morphy goes with the brilliant move e5. And this is a move that combines two ideas, actually three ideas. The first idea, you are attacking the knight and proving that the knight is not on a stable square. The second idea, you're trying to open this line. What does it mean to open a line? Open a line, it's when there is no pawns on a file or on a diagonal. For example, in this case, this is a file, by the way, and this is a diagonal, for example. So after e5, you are opening this file because you're trying to eliminate your own pawn. And after d takes e5, you are also opening this diagonal because now there is no longer a pawn here. And now it comes a really brilliant move by Morphy. Morphy wants basically two things. The first thing is to finish the development of his pieces. And the second thing is to prevent black from castling. Because we know that black on the next move, he really wants to castle because it will make his king much safer. But bishop a3, excellent, excellent, excellent move by Paul Morphy. Because now you're activating this bishop. Now this bishop is quite good. It's quite safe also. And as the bishop is attacking this square, it prevents black from castling. This for you to know, in case you don't. If one of the squares where the king will move when he makes the castle, it's attacked by, of course, by one of your pieces, the other king cannot move, cannot castle, I mean. The other king cannot castle. So in this position, black's king cannot make castle. And this is very important to know. And this move is just brilliant. Now, black decides to take another pawn. And this is really fascinating because if we count the material, black has 3 extra pawns that white doesn't have. But it doesn't matter. White's position is more active, and especially black's king is still in the center. So queen b3, attacking the f7 square with the queen and with the bishop, and black decides to defend with the move bishop e6, which basically will lose the game already, because after bishop takes, black needs to recover the material, black needs to take this bishop back. And now queen takes, it's a check, and the only move that black can do is to protect with the knight, is to cover the check with the knight. And after knight takes bishop, black is forced to take with the pawn, because if black takes with the queen, this will leave this knight unprotected and attacked by 2 pieces. So queen takes e7, it's checkmate. The queen is attacking the king cannot move, and the bishop is protecting the queen. So black needs to take with the pawn, and now rook f to e1, increasing the pressure over e7, and this is basically game over. Black tried to exchange the queens, and actually white allows the queen exchange, but wins a knight. And the problem for black is that black's king is still on a very bad position, and now Morphy just brings the last piece into the game. And you can see that all of the white's pieces are occupying really active and really safe squares. It's important to notice that this pawn cannot take this knight because this pawn is pinned. The king would be in check in case the pawn takes the knight. So it's not possible for black to take this knight. So it's basically game over. Black will just get crushed by all of the white's pieces. So here, now bishop d6, really good move. White is accepting to lose the knight, but basically this will be a discovered check. You can see the rook is in the middle of the check, so this is discovered check. And then you can start taking all of the black pieces like this. If the king goes here, this will be checkmate. This is another discovered check. This is checkmate. And it's basically game over. Black tried this move, and white just took, check, and just took the rook. And after black takes the knight, there is rook check. And here, the easiest way to win is just changing your opponent's last piece. And this position with an extra bishop should be an easy conversion for Paul Morphy. How to win the endgames, it's something that we will discuss in another video. But basically what you have to do to win most of the endgames is just promote a pawn. What does it mean promote a pawn? Bring one of your pawns to the 8th rank, turn it into a queen. This is something that we will definitely be covering in this series. But for the moment, this game ended here, and this video will end here. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I really hope you learned something new, or at least uh, you saw again some concepts that you already knew. But I hope this video was helpful for you. So remember, if you want to help my channel to grow, you can subscribe, and I really recommend you to do it because I will make a definitive course on how to break different rating barriers. My name is Jose Gascon, and I hope you like this video. I see you in the next one. Bye.